Diese Konferenz wird nun aufgezeichnet.
Okay. Today, major topic, scripting in IBExpert. And scripting in IBExpert, you know, perhaps scripting in SQL language like stored procedural language, execute block statements, and all the stuff that is possible inside Firebird, also possible to be executed with ISQL from command line. Gives you already a lot of possibilities to work in more complex environments. If you want to have some of the basic functionalities, which a lot of you might only know from IBExpert, for example, something like the tools database comparer. What happens if we have the tools database comparer? It's a very simple wizard to, for example, check out the differences between this database, and I will do a second copy of that database. So I will copy DB1 to DB2, and DB2 was already used, I think, last week, so we can use it already here also. So we will use this registration info on port 3050, but it should now be DB2 and DB2, and now here's DB2, and this one is DB1, and DB1, for example, is completely different to DB2. And if we want to have the results between these two databases, how to do that? So a very simple way would be, we want to have all the objects from database 2 also in database 1, but we want to have the objects in database 1 to be dropped that are not in database 2. So if we have here a test table, it should be also sent to database 1, but we want to have the comparison. How to do that? Very simple. DB2 is my reference, DB1 is my target, and we have here a lot of possibilities. Server version is mostly detected automatically. We can say, okay, we just want to have domains, tables, the different objects that are available in the individual Firebird version that we are working on. We can add if they should be compared or not, and it's a very simple way to do so. So let's start that. And when I start that, it will get a result in a special editor, and that's one of the differences between older versions of IBExpert and current version of IBExpert. I will have to close my window because there was a big truck running around here. And I just see here, for example, a specific table, create table commands, and all these objects, but you cannot execute that from here. If you will start the button again, you will get again a compare process. You have to use the script executive, and in script executive we can now execute that and operate the changes. That's one of the ways how you can detect the differences between two databases. But if you, for example, consider you have a installation for customers with several hundred of locations, and you want to have different database structures to be compared, it's not a good idea to make it in a GUI environment. So that's one of the reasons why we started to implement a scripting language. And the scripting language is always starting with execute IBEBlock. IBEBlock is more or less similar to block. Execute block is a functionality that is included in Firebird, but IBEBlock has a lot of extensions based on that, and you will see a lot of possibilities within the next minutes in this session. So let's see what happens. See what was happening here when I was looking here: source database, target database, server version, and different parameters. In the execute block, you will see exactly the same thing. You will have the compare metadata, you have the source DB, you have the target DB, and you have different parameters here. And this parameter must be set manually. So how to operate a database compare automatically? So simply go to options, set up everything that you need, and then go to the IBEBlock and save that to file. And when I save that to file, we going here to GT3. So get together day, no, not day 3, but the third day, the third directory. And I want to have the compare databases here, for example, implemented. When I go to that text file that is now available here, and I simply open it in Notepad or wherever, it's a simple text file, you can directly manipulate that. And what we want to have here, for example, we can also open that inside IBExpert in the SQL editor to make it a little bit more failure safe. We want to have here CGT3 CMP race.sql, so that we can now remove that comment. And what we have now is a simple script that can be executed really easy, because when I now start a command prompt and I start a command line version of IBExpert, IBEScript, it should be in your default search path of your application. If it's not, you can simply find it here in HK Software, IBExpert IBEScript.dll. That's an application that is automatically installed with any licensed IBExpert version, except the day license. The day license has not the scripting engine included, but for the day license, it makes no sense to have the scripting language included. But you have also the possibility to subscribe for a standard IBExpert Developer Studio version that has it included. The so-called company year edition or the server year edition, you also have the possibility. And there's also a possibility to have only the scripting engine available. That's called the server tools. So let's try that. And we simply say IBEscript cmp.sql. So what happens? That was a very fast comparison between the source database and the target database. And the result was stored here in this SQL script. So whatever we have as a difference between the two databases, IBExpert is capable of creating a script, drop everything that is not needed, drop the individual parts that might be a problem part in your database. For example, create procedure only with an empty body here, create and drop the triggers, and everything else is done here automatically when it's needed on changing the database. How to automate that? Extremely simple. Copy con. The people from the time before Notepad know what I'm doing now. Copy con cmp.dat. And we simply say we want to have the IBEscript cmp.sql to be executed. And in the next step, we want to have the cmp race.sql to be executed. That's simply the result. So what happens if I now do the cmp? It will create the result script. It will execute the result script. And now the second database, database 1 is a target database, should now have the same structure like the database 2. Let's try that again. And as you can see here now, there are almost nothing to be done here inside my script execution. And now we see also the CMP res is now exactly the same. If we now go to the interactive version of the database comparer and we simply run that, we will also see that there are no differences found. So that can be done automatically using the IBEscript language or the IBEBlock language, using the command line tool IBEScript but a lot of you might have problems with, for example, several ideas. For example, if we have a look at this file, we have here the original password in source code. If you run a batch file based on a text file that have your database password in clear text, that's not always the best idea. To avoid that problem, we can do the following. We will do the IBEscript CMP SQL, and I will show you some of the parameters which are possible. We simply have to use no parameter to see all the parameters. -s, silent mode, -v, verbose, so a log file is written, and minus lowercase v, verbose output file, it's appended or overwritten, depending on the capital or lower. Display only error message, -e. Error messages and user progress. You will see later in some other scripts how a progress is done, a comment that should be readable inside the execution engine, -n, continue after error, -t, write time step into log. And the one that I wanted to show you are the ones here below, -e, -d, and so on. -e, you can use it also with a specific password, but we will use it with default because the default is already enough for most of the customers. When we start that, we say cmp.sql and cmp.sql -e. What happens now? It is not executed. We will get a new version of the script file. The script file is now called -.sql.esql, encrypted SQL. And when we have a look at the script file, for example, in Notepad, it is a little bit hard to read. It's not really in Chinese language, but it's almost impossible to decode that. So you do not have the username and password and clear text inside that file. But you can directly execute that in the same way as you know that. For example, if we go to the IBEscript, to the batch file that we are using, and we execute now not SQL but .esql, and we remove the original script. We simply rename it with an underscore in front of that, and we save that and we run that again. CMP. CMP, I think I renamed the wrong one. CMP.bat. CMP.bat. Now it is. And you can see it's still working. So it has technically no problem to be executed also from an encrypted mode. And you can, for example, also run that on a customer machine without having the problem that you will have the result set to be read by the end user. One of the recommendations is always that after that you do the delete or del, I think it's cmp res.sql, because the result set is still available in unencrypted mode for this operation. But you see now it is dropped and it runs extremely fast. So you can, for example, run the IBEscript exit from a batch file. You can use it from the task scheduler that is available inside IBExpert, inside your Windows environment. IBEscript runs also in Wine on Linux. It's also no problem to execute that on Linux. So you also have the possibilities to work with that on that way. It's a little bit warm in my office at the moment. I think you might perhaps see that already, but sometimes we like the warmer days. running something from a batch script is always one of the possibilities, but sometimes you want to have the basic functionality of that script also as a part of your application. And that's also possible for 32-bit applications. We have, for example, inside IBExpert, we have the possibilities if you have the full IBExpert version installed. You also have here the IBEScript.dll. IBEScript.dll here is simply the IBEScript.dll. This one is a DLL file, and I copy that. And I will also copy, I think that should be enough. And I copy that to the demo application folder. Paste. In the demo application folder, I will now do the following. I will now change some things in my application. For example, I will drop the animals table. I think it should be possible. There are no relations between that. And what I want to do now is really simple. I want to show you how the IBEscript.dll is called from a very simple Delphi application. And as you can see here in our source code date, it is already a very stable API that we are using. So we do not use a lot of changes inside our calling of the DLL, even that the DLL has a lot of possibilities in newer versions and that the older versions will not have. So when we have a look at the DPR file, that's really extremely simple, as you can see. And when we are going for people who know, for example, Delphi programming, that could be also really easy now, understanding the Pascal source code. And it's a very simple form, a tform1 class tform with some tab sheets and some buttons and some script memo and button 1 click, button 2 click. And this part is more or less the relevant part. Because in that part we have the specific types which are needed for calling the DLL. And you can, for example, now have here the execute script proc and the db connect proc. And you have several functions, for example, events to handle error messaging and so on inside your own application. So it must not be done from a script file and written to a text file or to a log file. It can be directly done also on that way. And if you will have a look at the calling of the DLL, you see it here. So we simply have here the possibility, script file is empty, nothing to do. Load library, pchar IBEscript.dll, and it has found the handle, so it will get the procedure address for exec script text, and then it will do the exec script text. So it's a very basic functionality that you need to understand, and it could be also really easy implemented inside other platforms, like, for example, C++ or whatever you want as a DLL programming environment. Yeah, let's try that. So we have the possibilities now. We are starting the test DLL, and we go to execute text, and I will simply now go to the GT3 folder, and you see original source code from that, and I copy it to my script text, and I will execute that. And as you can see, the comp race is created here, and the function to get the results that we see in the DOS mode is not implemented in this example, so we do not see here the result. But the interesting thing is now we see here exactly the table that is now the difference between the two database metadata versions that were detected by the environment engine without calling the batch file or calling something else. It's simply a call direct from your own application. And that makes it possible to include all the functionalities, everything that is possible with IBExpert, with IBEBlock, also direct in your application. We have the computer-based licensing, which is, for example, possible that you're using the server tools, or we also have the possibilities for companies who want to have the functionality inside their application and distribute that without any activation. You can also buy a so-called IBEScript OEM version, and the OEM version gives you a specific API that you can call, and based on that API you can call the IBEScript.dll or the IBEScript Excel without any additional activation. So we have a lot of customers who already distribute our tools together with that. And as you can imagine from the very simple source code that we have seen here in the demo application, it's really not more than this one. And it includes already the text file calling and the DLL text calling. So it's really easy to understand how to work with that. Let's have a look at what we can do also. Let's have in mind that we, for example, have the general possibilities that we have here, the table data. And when we have a look at animals, for example, we see here a list of animals. You might remember when you were already in my session for the ODBC connector, that is the result that we have created inside an Excel file and copied that using the ODBC engine inside IBExpert to a Firebird database. And when we go to the second database, the target database, we now have we should have the animal table. And we did not have that because I just used the compare, but I did not execute that. I will do that now again. And when we see now that and that, now we have the possibilities to have a look at the animals table, but it's empty because there was no reason for not being empty, because there were no data exchange. How to make a data exchange as fast as possible? Let's have a look at the basic idea. Often a problem is when you compare databases, data from one source to another, it could be often a problem that you will have some triggers here, and the triggers will write some data. One of the things that you can do is really simple. This one is a target database. This one should have the new records, and this one is a source database. In the target database, you can simply say deactivate triggers. And deactivate triggers is really a very simple possibility. For example, you can say commit trigger body, which helps you, for example, also to resolve dependency problems that you might have inside your comparison also, or simply make the trigger inactive. So what could that mean? It's really simple. Now all the triggers were made inactive. You see that also here, all are now grayed out. And in the next step, we simply say, okay, database table data comparer. And in table data comparer, I now take the DB2 as my master, the DB1 as my target. I check right click, select all. And I also say online synchronization. In that moment, when you're working with larger databases, it could be a good option to start already with the compare when it detects the first differences between the databases. Otherwise, you will have to run always until the end to be successful. And that could be on larger databases a stupid idea. So online synchronization could be a very easy way to be executed. And we will also do here the following. We will already have a look at the IBEBlock. And the IBEBlock, as you can see here again, is now pre-configured for you. I will copy that into the clipboard. I will copy it here into a SQL editor. And I want to have the result, the file name, to be here in our GT3. compare data, for example, .sql. I will store that, and I want to store that as compare data .sql in my folder. And when I run that, what happens? Exactly the same. You see here a lot of operations. And while it is running, since we have used the synchronized online functionality, it will already be executed at the moment. You will now, for example, see that some of the executions are still in process. Now they are over. And when I have a look now at the animals table, and we go to the commit, we have forgotten something. I think, why is it not done automatically? DB2 to DB1, animals should be part of that. It should have been done automatically. Let's try that here inside IBExpert. And it will show you here some statistics, how many differences are. That's a very easy and helpful information. You cannot process tables without primary keys. So also not only this functionality is one of the reasons to have a unique primary key. Let's try to make that possible. So make that possible simply says we go to animals. Do we have a column that could be used as a primary key? When we have a look at the data, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even that we have currently a double precision numeric value with decimals, it's not the best idea to have it as a primary key field. But I always recommend to always have in any table always a primary key, because this table was only used for importing the data. It does not have now a primary key, but we will add some primary key. So we will just have a double click on that column and we will say not null. Primary key columns must always be not null.
Es con V, no con S.
¿Sí te gustó lo que te envié? Dos correos míos.
Sí, claro. De hecho, ya te contesté.
Okay, Miguel, we are hearing you.
Primero ese.
No problem with that.
Ahí dice, sube. Mira, ¿no se ven adorables?
No, mira, no se ven. Ojo, ven es con V.
No, señor. Es que yo le pregunté, yo iba a escribir
¿A
con V
quién?
a Camila, pero ella no me dijo que no sabía. Listo. Mira, aquí la familia.
Miguel,
Eso es una foto en Google misma, la encontré yo. Tintín, el hermano y la novia, mira.
Hello.
La novia de Tintín y la hermana de Tintín.
Sí.
Sí, está muy bien, mi amor.
¿Les puedo escuchar?
Claro, mi amor. Cuando dejes de ser mal lineado. No, son muchas cositas.
Sí, no,
no hay tal.
Y también es por Camila. Voy a llamar a Camila.
I think I closed now your microphone, or you closed it for whatever problem it is. It's no problem if someone will go into your office. I know that problem. We know that from Corona times. We know a lot of new problems that we did not know before. So what did I do? I simply added here the not null possibilities, the not null flag for the column. But it's always important to have that a little bit in mind. Any column is always referenced by a domain, and a domain, if you do not use specific domains, the domain will be created automatically. And the best thing is always that you have the not null flag not only in the column, in the column it's $RDB relation fields, but also in the domain. And in the domain, you have the $RDB fields. So it must be, it's very important that these should be synchronized and not one has the not null flag and the other one does not have the not null flag. That makes no big sense. So to prepare any column to be become a primary key, it must be not null. It should be not null from not null in the IBEBlock relation fields, but also in the IBEBlock fields. And then we can now add the constraint, right-click, new primary key on the number column, and we can now compile that. And when we now do the database compare back again, and we do it in the SQL version based on our script, compare data, it should be hello. I think I found the wrong one. I think it was a result file that I just loaded. Hello. I wanted to have that one here and not the compare data. That one should be loaded. So that one was the result. And we simply do exactly the same. And when we now have a look at DB1 animals, we see the data as expected. So that's one of the things that you always need to have in mind when you're using the tools. Table data comparer, it can only process data from tables that have a primary key. From my perspective, there's no reason to have any table without a primary key. That's a general rule from my perspective. So you should not have any table without a primary key, even that our demo database has some tables without a primary key, but some of them are because of simply demo reasons. So the next step would be to reactivate the triggers, because after the data was synchronized between the two databases, we now want to have the triggers to be reactivated again. So right-click on the trigger, activate triggers, activate all triggers, and make triggers active. And that's it. So that can be done really fast, really easy, and you also have some possibilities inside the IBExpert scripting language, which can also be used for that. For example, when we have a look at the SQL statement here, let's have a look at some possibilities. Use target DB. Use target DB. So we open the target DB, and we have functionalities inside IBExpert, a lot of scripting possibilities. And especially Delphi programmers might already find out that a lot of them are perhaps already known by them. And one of the things that we can also have here is, for example, the IBEC, where is it? I have to look it up. Recompile trigger, for example, is one of the functionalities. We will have a look at these functions a little bit later. Here we have, for example, the recompile trigger function that can be used for that. But a very different version is also possible, really easy to understand. For example, if you are calling such a statement, such a script functionality later, you can, for example, also do the following. We have the system table, IBEBlock triggers. And IBEBlock triggers contains all the triggers that we have inside our database. So if we say, select IBEBlock trigger name, everything else is not really needed. So we simply can remove everything else from $$ triggers, where $$ trigger name not containing the $, because the $sign are the system triggers. We do not want to process them into $$ trigger name, and we do a trim around that. Do execute statement. Execute statement, alter trigger $. I will simply make the variable a little bit shorter. One of the things that you have also as a difference in IBEBlock language, you do not have to declare the variables. On the other hand, any wrong written variable is a new variable, so always have that in mind. TRG, and we want to have it inactive, and we want to commit that. And at the end, we say, so now we do the compare tables, and then we do the master DB that is here not really needed. Use target DB, and we reactivate the triggers again. So let's try that. I will remove the try finally blocks. Let's try that and execute that. We have a pathing error. And when you are doing the scripting development inside your IBExpert environment, you always get the possibility for select. I have to use a for select into to make it work. And I will do the compare data in the new version here. Should be replaced. And we still have again a parsing error. Do execute statement into TRG for select. We should use it twice with the same syntax. Otherwise, it makes no sense. So let's start it again. And triggers created automatically cannot be modified. Yes, one of the important things that you also have in mind. Let's have a look at all the triggers, and we have not only the system triggers like $$ relation constraint triggers and so on. We also have a lot of other triggers. For example, here check constraints and view triggers and everything else. And one of the possible flags that we can use for that is really simple. We just want to have the triggers to be executed that have the system flag 0. That's important. So system flag 0 are the manual triggers that you have created on your own. So we simply say where $$ relation flag equals 0. So let's do that. Where $$ triggers. So we do not have to check for the $, system flag equals 0. And we have to use it there and also there. And let's try to start it again. And as you can see, he's already at comparing the data. And he automatically disconnected or deactivated the triggers and reactivated the triggers. And when you are doing here, for example, one of the things, what could be, for example, a typical thing, when you have, for example, on the table animals, you have, for example, some data missing, and you have an insert trigger that does some operations on other tables. It should not be executed while doing the compare. And when you have a look at this implementation, it is a very easy way to, for example, have a database compare, deactivate all the triggers, do the database compare using the scripting functionality, and activate the triggers afterwards again. It's perhaps not a good idea to work on the database after the triggers are deactivated and the database compare is done. But the good thing is we are only working on the target database. So if you are working on a master database, for example, you can still work on the master database without any problem, because all the records that are detected on the master database are still in the compare tables detected, and you can directly see that. So that can be run really fast and really easy. And if you do not only mark in the editor some of the text, it will run everything. So it's a very, very fast and easy way. You can also use it more or less like I would call it a, perhaps for smaller database, a poor man's replication or something like that. But in fact, replication is much more complicated and much more a different way. But it's also one of the things that you can have in mind. It's a very easy way to have a kind of a live backup of your database, an almost live backup. Because when you have, for example, a database which has 90% of the data not updated over the day or not inserted or not deleted, you can simply run such a script every hour or so, and it runs in a, depend on what you want, lower process level. So it's just working as a simple client. So it does some SQL statements, but not very complex SQL statements. And it will allow you to have a more or less synchronized second databases on the fly, and at any time you want to have that. So that's really one of the things I wanted to show you. So for example, you have a script, and in most of the editors that you have here inside IBExpert, you see that the script executive or the scripting engine will create for you a template for the IBEBlock. And that's really helpful to write almost anything from scratch. You do not have to write any line of code by hand. You can take as much as possible from existing examples. And let's have a look at some of the functions that we have available. So, and as I said, anything that is anywhere running with IBEBlock can be used in IBExpert, exe in IBEBlock.exe, in IBEScript.exe, in IBEScript.dll. And anything that you have seen, for example, here, can be done from your own application, from batch files, from whatever. So let's have a look at what we can do, for example, to operate inside such a block. I have every command with IBEC, starting IBEC. That's an IBExpert command or an IBExpert command API. And what can you do? Let's go through most of the functions. We will have a basic talk about each of the functions, because when we talk about any function in detail, you will see that you will have a lot of time to be wasted here. Alter user management, create, alter, drop user. More important for older Firebird versions. Nowadays, it's really easy to create, alter, drop users from SQL statements. But in older Firebird versions, 2.1 or 2.0 or even older, it's still important to, because you cannot create a user based on that in older Firebird versions. And operator, that's really not really to be explained. ANSI lowercase, ANSI string to UTF-8. If you, for example, work with UTF-8 databases and you get, for example, a text file from a non-UTF-8 source, and you want to import that, you can directly use the function to convert the existing application or the existing file to a UTF-8 file. ANSI uppercase, array functionalities, backup database. You can, for example, also call the the gbag possibilities, but you can also do that here from a script file without a problem. Build that is one of the functionalities that are available inside IBExpert, the so-called you see tables. You see here a specific button. Where is it? On the data tab. You see here the data analysis button, and the data analysis button will give you a possibility, for example, to have here a OLAP cube design tool. So it's perhaps a topic for a different session. Cast operator, char operator to get different characters. Clone connection, close connections, that is to get connections to several databases. CMP records, some possibilities to compare arrays, CMP vals, coalesce. Compare metadata, you have seen that. The compare metadata already, we've used that already. And if you know that function exists, you see here also the possible parameters. And also really important, if you have seen some of the functions that might be of interest, just go inside that function name, press F1, and the website will open. And you typically get a very nice example for most of the functions for what you can do with that, what are the possible parameters. And here is, for example, a function how to do a comparison between two databases and some other possibilities. If you are missing some of the functions, just leave us a hint and we will add that. We have not implemented every function as a own page, because some of the functions, like for example the char function, is very boring because it simply just needs a number and you get the character for that. So it's not so much to explain. But if you are missing some of the functions, it could be helpful. Compare tables, that was the function that we just used for comparing the data of the tables. Compress file or compress variable. So if you, for example, want to have the result or a script file to be transmitted over the internet as an email attachment, we will also have some functions here later for connecting our script to a email server, sending or receiving the data. It's also possible, and you can also use that function directly to compress a file before you send it. So it saves some time while sending that. Concatenation, copy, Delphi programmers know what's it about. Copy data is copy data, as the name already says. Copy file, copies file, copy to clipboard, and so on. Cursor functions, specific cursor functions were implemented very long years ago. Create connection, for example, gives you also the possibility to create connections to more than one database. As you have seen in my latest script, we are connecting to 2 databases. We can connect to almost unlimited databases from one script. And when you go to the import-export session video, you can also see that you can connect, for example, also to an ODBC connection. And any ODBC connection can be a target of a script or a source of data of the script, or both at the same time. Create database function, create model script. Model script is for the entity relationship diagram tool. I typically do not use that because most of the database design is done by me inside the text mode and not inside the graphical mode, but that can be a little bit different. Create report, I think we have talked about that also in the import-export functionality session. If not, we can open that a little bit later or simply have a look at that help function. Create user, carriage return line, field, date, day of week. DBD get object properties. I have to explain it to you later because I'm at the moment not aware of that. Debug message, you can, for example, send a debug message from that to see, for example, in the debugger specific informations. Decode, decode date, decompress, the opposite function to compress. Delete file, directory exists, diff functions, that's a mathematical diff function, drop database, drop user. DS are dataset functions, so if you need a memory-based dataset, you can also use these very fast DS functions inside IBEScript. But newer versions, you also have the possibilities to use the global temporary tables, which are also in memory. But perhaps sometimes some of these functions could be sometimes a little bit faster. Encode date, error message, getting the last error message, error name, getting the last error name, error secret code, getting the last error secret code, and so on. Exec, you can exec any command line from a IBEBlock script, and we also showed that, I think, for exporting data from, for example, a PDF file or something like that. It could be that if you are interested in that, we can also focus in one of the future sessions a little bit more on handling other processes, because it's sometimes much easier than you think. Exec script, you can call, for example, a IBEBlock or any SQL script from IBEBlock. So that's also possible to have a string variable and put all your stuff together inside that string variable, and at the end execute that as a working script on the fly. Exec SQL script, connect that execution directly to a separate database connection. Explode will give you, for example, an array to be exploded. You would see that into a functionality based on the example. Export report is something like the create report, for example. You can also use, for example, IBExpert and IBEScript, and we use it very often for that, to create PDF files on the fly. So we have a functionality here inside which is tooled Report Manager. In Report Manager, you can design everything from graphical perspective, and then you can use the IBEC create report function to initialize the content of the report. And export report can be used, for example, to create it as a PDF file, as an HTML file, as an Excel file, or whatever you want. When we go to export report and press F1, you see here, for example, the possible types that we can directly support from the scripting engine. So the most often used that we use is the ERPDF, and you do not need any other scripting or PDF creation engine, no printing engine or whatever. Everything is already built inside IBExpert to create, for example, PDFs from there. So let's go to the next one. Export report, extract file here, extract file name, extract metadata. That was the function that we have in tools, extract metadata. Also a very complex functionality to have a metadata script, including the data from any database, also possible. Reading file attributes, reading file date time, detecting if a file exists or not, detecting the file size. We have at the moment, for example, a project for a customer where we store approximately 1 million files from their PDF network location into a database, putting that into a full text search engine, and do a lot of things on top of that. In some of the files, it's an insurance company. Some of the files are approximately already 20 years old, but they need to have it for the full time of the contract. So also we need to be able to find out, for example, a 20-year-old PDF file from somewhere from the network. But we also have to know that the PDF file has a specific file date time. And reading the file datetime, a set function, and we also have a function which comes later, set file datetime, to, for example, to get the data from a blob and put the data from the blob into the file system again and set it the file to have the exact same file datetime that it had before and not the current file datetime. Also, one of the possibilities possible in Firebird, especially combined with IBExpert, that you have a lot of possibilities, for example, to store files inside databases. A lot of customers are really happy about that they can use the files inside the database and not only inside the file system, because when somebody is working inside your file system and he's moving by accident some folder to a subfolder of something else, nobody will ever find that records again, that files again, and that cannot happen without any intention directly in the database. Force directories, so if you have multiple directories to be created in one line with subdirectories and subdirectories, you can do that. And it will not give you an error if it exists already, and so on. Format functions, format datetime functions, format float, format ident, and so on. And global variable, for example, can be given to the scripting engine also. When we go again to the IBEscript, one of the functions also, the -g functions is, for example, here the -g global variable. So you can also give a variable to a script, and there are functions to get the variable from the calling procedure, from the calling parameters inside your script. For example, if you want to execute a script and you want to have the connection string to be transmitted to the script as a parameter, you do not have to do it inside the text mode. You can directly use it as a parameter. File attributes, force directories, formatting, FS, file system operations. You might perhaps already know the load from file, save to file, that functions are also available, but working with larger files and working with different data types, for example, gives you also the possibility, if you get a kind of a binary file and you have to import that, there's no SQL language for that. You cannot directly say, okay, import the data from a text file that is not really a text file when it's binary, and the file system functions allow you to do so. FTP functions. One of the things that we also often use is right after creating a PDF file from IBExpert, for example, that we simply upload that PDF file to a specific location, to a web server. And in a web server environment, we simply do a forward to that address, and the client application, for example, the client browser connection is directly forwarded to that new directory, and you can directly operate that. You can afterwards delete that. You can change file datetime and FTP. Everything that is typically possible with FTP is more or less supported by us. IBC get command line. Getting the command line information, for example, the parameters that were called, connection properties can be called, current directory can be detected. Default connection, the connection when we are starting, for example, a script from IBExpert without any specific connection, it will take the connection that is currently already open. Get environment variable, that's simple. Everything that you can find here in the set operator, for example, get environment variable username, and you find the username that is located to that current user, or the user domain, which is here the computer name is also possible, IBE162, which is a virtual machine computer name here, and so on. So the get functions will allow you to have a lot of informations. Get files, I think already showed, for example, importing and exporting block data and PDF files and so on. Simply go to that video again and you will see what is possible with that. It's really a very easy way to, for example, get an overview about the file system content. And at the customer, the insurance company that I'm currently talking about, we have approximately a network drive with approximately, I think at the moment we are at 850,000 files in subdirectories from subdirectories with subdirectories. And we use IBEC get files to get an inventory of the files. And that was really interesting because they had a lot of files in subdirectories where they should not have been, because they were changed for whatever reasons. And they found out because we had the subdirectory into a database that there were some data in wrong subdirectories. Get global variable, get IBExpert versions, get last error, get object script. For example, when you, for example, want to have the script for a trigger, a script for the table, a script for a whatever object you find in IBExpert, you can get the script here directly using this function. Get run directory, get server log file content. So server log, you know, perhaps it's a Firebird log from a specific server, and then you can, for example, automate the detection or the operation on the server automatically. And you can search, for example, with position is one of the functions that will come in the next step for specific error messages or something like that. That's really easy. Get explain statement plan or get statement plan, explain plan. Interesting word, get statement explain plan. Sounds strange. One of the functions that you have in Firebird 3 that will get a very complex, detailed information about the index structure that was used by a specific SQL statement or object. In Firebird 2.5 or older, you can use a get statement plan without explain. In that case, you can also use that in Firebird 3. You get a shorter version of the plan, which table uses which index, and so on. The typical performance stuff that we also were talking about already. Get tick count. What is really easy, the number of milliseconds since the computer was started. Get user DB connection, that's for the Firebird internal functionalities, IBExpert internal functionalities for getting access to the user database connection. Getting user properties or getting the users which are available on a specific database server. You can, for example, have a look at that. Get view recreate script. Recreating a view is sometimes easier rather than dropping the view and creating the view. That depends on creating a GUI ID. High function is, for example, for processing arrays. For example, the maximum number of array content members is a high. And HTTP functionalities. When you have, for example, when you need, for whatever reason, access to any HTTP server, for example, for getting a REST API connection or whatever, a lot of possibilities using the HTTPI functions. The IBE functions, special functions for IBExpert internally. So get some API to control IBExpert internally. IB trigger type to string, IB type to string. That's one of the decoding of text and functions. IF, you know that function might be already. And this one is the first way to connect to email servers, the IMAP server. When you want to connect, for example, to IMAP, what is really important when you want to connect to IMAP, an IMAP session can be created also using the open session and a closed session and so on. What is really important if you are working with IBEScript and IMAP or POP3, which is also possible, and you are using a SSL connection, it's important that you have the lib and SSL EA. These two libraries should be wherever you have the IBEScript.dll if you use that, or the IBEScript.exe if you use that, or if you are using IBExpert, also use that. So if you're using a 993 IMAP connection, you will see that an IMAP connection requires that DLL, otherwise it will not connect to that server. And but with that, it's no problem at all to connect to that server. IMAP. INI file processing. Import data. Simply go to the tools, import data, and click together whatever you need, and go to the IBEBlock page, and you will see also again what is possible to automate your import data operations. Really easy. Index of value, find data inside your arrays. INI file operations, INI close, INI read, array section, get strings, open, read string, write string, up, and so on. So typical INI file operatings. Input query, same as you might also know from Delphi. Into hex, simply conversion function, some JSON functions. And the JSON functions are not so good documented, but if you, for example, simply try it out, most of them are more or less self-explaining. And if you need, for example, more detailed description, just let us know, because in most cases, yeah, you might understand that documentation also takes a lot of time to have a proper functionality. Kill task. Really simple to execute, for example, a specific task. If you, for example, want to call something that is a PDF conversion tool or whatever, in that moment you are also able to kill that task. Length of a string, load from file. Any text file can be loaded from file. Not only text files, you can also load binary files into variables with IB, so load from file. And after that, you have the result inside a variable, and the variable can now be, for example, used in this update, insert, delete, and an update or insert statement for putting block data into the database. It's also really easy. We have used that also in the session where I was talking about the PDF file operations. MD5 operations, so getting MD5 string from a specific string, MD5 file name from a specific string, message dialog, simply mostly like an input query, but message dialog does not allow you to enter something except choosing the button that you want to see. MIMA operations. If you get, for example, a email and you want to download the email using the IMAP or the POP3 functions, which will come here lower, and you have an attachment inside that email file, you can directly operate this from the script and get the attachment count, the attachment data, attachment file name, and there are some really interesting examples. For example, also to operate on a mail server to get the mails downloaded automatically or send mails automatically is also possible. We will see one of the functions, which is SMTP send mail later, which allow you to, for example, automate sending data as a result, for example, for existing web server processes or whatever. The mod operator, move file operator, MS-XML functions. So basically the functions are exactly doing the same like they are doing in the original MS SQL toolkit. And not operator, now operator, current timestamp, online database, shut down the database, make it online again, and so on. The pass CSV file, the CSV line allows you to, for example, extract CSV file content to several variables, to an array. Password query, ask somebody for a password, but do not show it to him. A pause operator with a number of milliseconds, how long it should wait. We also have a sleep operator, which will not show something. Pause operator will show something. POP3 functions. POP3, the other email possibilities, also combined with EMAP. Pose operator, position, find a string in a specific string. POSEX is starting at a specific position. Power operator, regular expressions. Prepare statements, for example, to find out if a statement is valid or not. Progress, that is the messaging function for that. PSQL, analyze, comment body, error count, format. The PSQL functions allow you to operate on a specific object, for example, to do a automatically put comments inside the source code of a trigger or the stored procedure to avoid the object in use or dependencies problem. Similar that we have done inside the deactivation of the triggers. We can, for example, operate a lot of things there automatically. Some kind of random functions, random character functions, random string, random values, regular expressions functions, and recompile procedure, recompile trigger, also what we were talking about already. One of the things that you should also have in mind, if you're doing a backup and a restore of the database, backup Firebird 2.5, restore on Firebird 3, for example, any procedure and any trigger is not recompiled. It is simply stored inside the backup process into the backup file, and from the restore process, the data is stored again into the system file, but it's not recompiled. It could be that some of the object metadata, the text-based metadata, the source code of your objects, cannot compile inside the new platform. And it's also one of the things that you can automate in that moment if you are using only on one specific database platform. For example, all of your customers have the same database structure. It is in most cases much easier. But recompile trigger, recompile procedure allows you, for example, also to recompile everything after you did a backup and restore of the database to be sure that the recompile also uses perhaps the new functionalities of the individual platforms. As I said, nothing is automatically recompiled, also not in the backup and restore, and definitely also not in the backup and restore from one version of Firebird to a newer version. That is not done automatically. Recreate user. If the user exists already, it will be updated. Otherwise, it will be inserted. Registry operations, read integer, write integer, and so on. So everything that you want to see from the registry can be done in that way. Register the IBExpert key. There's an example also in IBExpert when you want to work with Firebird 3 with an encrypted database. You have in IBExpert already a fully functional example for an encrypted database. For example, here in the Firebird 3 subdirectory, there is a FB client DLL that can be used, for example, for an embedded database operation, so there's no server version of the Firebird 3 encryption tool inside that. But just have a look at the Firebird encryption. There's a tutorial on our website. And we have here, for example, also the IBEScript. There's a IBEScript.dll. If you want to find out how an encryption in Firebird really works, that's a very easy way to understand that, because you can also see the individual statements there that can be tested automatically. It can be also used for production environment, but because it's not for the full server version available inside IBExpert. You can still buy it using the server tools. You will have access to the full server version, but not in the IBExpert itself. So remove directory, drop any directory, rename file, restore database, save to file, to put, for example, data from a blob column to a local file. Set connection properties, set current directory, set environment variable, and set file attributes, set file datetime, set global bar, set kill timer. It's one of the functions that is also new, that operations can be killed automatically. Set length for arrays, set user properties, shall execute. You know, for most platforms how to work with shall execute. Shift record to automate changes inside your arrays. Show message, the good old known function for most programmers already available. Shut down the database from a script. The sleep function. SMTP send mail, I mentioned that already several times. For example, very easy way to send an email from that. Let's have a look at how it works. Just press F1 and you will see here also how SSL operators are supported. And this is, for example, a very basic example. SMTP send mail. First one is a server, SMTP server, protocol name or number, username, password. This one is the humor of Alexander Sobarenko, so it's not mine. But this one is the to address, CC, BCC, and attachments are also possible. Subject, the message text itself, header informations, encoding informations, and so on. And you can directly send some emails from that. Important when you're using the SSL functionality, don't forget to have the DLLs that I just mentioned also inside the search path or inside the path of the executable. And let's go back to the SMTP send mail. String replace, really easy. String turn, string manipulation, time function, current time, string functions, remove spaces, URL download to file. Also one of the things that we are often using to automate some website downloads also. So if you have, for example, a specific list of informations on a website and you just want to have, for example, the page number 1, page number 2, page number 3, it is extremely fast that you can create with URL download to file a script that downloads almost anything from a web server. You can also use tools like wget or something like that for sure. But sometimes you want to automate that. We have used that functionality, for example, for a website where the special metal content components, where the current prices for copper and aluminum and so on can be downloaded, and we knew the URLs, and we simply created a script, downloaded the individual URLs from that website, for example, www.com/aluminium.html, and we simply were doing that. First part was the URL, second part was the file. We downloaded that, and we used the position functions, the substring functions, and so on, to get to that location inside the text file, that HTML text file, where the current stock price for that material is stored. And that was a very easy way. It was perhaps a 20-minute job to implement that for the customer who needed that daily prices in his calculation. And it was really easy to implement based on that. Download to var, in that case, you do not even have to put it into a file. You can directly put it into a variable inside the memory. Use connection. If you have seen when I was using the use operator inside my scripts to connect my script to a different database connection, it's more or less exactly the same, but in a little bit more character wasting version. So you can directly use IBEC use connection and bracket the connection name, or simply say use connection name, and that's it. UTF-8 to ASCII string, the other way around. IBEC wait for event. When you're working with event alerter, and event alerter, you have the function inside the trigger, for example, that, or inside the stored procedure, that you can execute a event from the server side, which is a simple statement post_event, and you give a string based on that to that event. You can use the IBEscript IBEC wait for event function to have on a specific connection to wait for exactly that event, and whenever this event with this following name will be initiated by the server for whatever reason, it will directly stop working, stop waiting. And that's really helpful, for example, if you want to operate things really fast. And one of the things where we also, for example, used that was a web server, and somebody was clicking on a web server simply on a button. The button was importing a record into a table. This table was using a trigger. The trigger was firing an event. And we were using a the wait for event function. And exactly in that moment when the trigger was putting the data into the button on the web server was putting the data into the table, and it was committed in that moment, it directly stopped waiting, and it created, using the create report function, a PDF file, export report function, exported it to a PDF file, uploaded that into the specific directory where the web server will expect that, and the web server itself in that moment was simply waiting approximately 2 seconds for redirecting the client to the resulting file URL, and it was also a very easy way to do that. And win get last error, just some error function, XOR operation, very simple way. What we want to talk about also, if I definitely know that some of your company, some of you who are listening to that videos are definitely also not only working with the American keyboard and the American character set. I was talking to some guy at a Borland conference more than 20 years ago, and I was complaining about some problems that I had with the character set implementation in Delphi at that time, and he was talking to me, sorry, I cannot answer, I'm from America. We have 26 characters. We do not have any problem with special characters. That convinced me in that moment that he was completely the wrong guy to talk about. But let's talk about how to implement a character set conversion. on one hand based on the manual way, but you will be able to see all the individual parts also later. And we want to have, for example, the DB1 to be converted to a DB1 database, but with a UTF-8 character set. It does not help if you're doing a backup and restore with a database character set conversion. It does not help. It will not change anything because the character set itself is stored here inside your tables. And where it is physically stored, it's really easy. It's in $RDB relations, $RDB relation fields, $RDB fields, and anywhere. So there is a lot of stuff available where we need to be able to implement that. And it's not so easy to do so. But how to do that? Tools, extract metadata. I have to open the database, tools, extract metadata, and tools, extract metadata, current database, extract directory. And what I want to have is now separate files. And we will go to separate files later to understand what will be done internally. GT3, C, GT3, extract, and I want to extract everything. I want to have also extracted all table data. That's also possible. Extract metadata can also extract data, which is really helpful when you're working with such a dump of the database. And we want to have here, for example, some specific parameters. Always include character set is always include collate for domains, fields, parameters, and so on. And what I want to have now is extremely simple. I also want to have here extracted the blobs. Reinsert is a functionality that is available in IBExpert to make scripts a little bit smaller. But most of the parts we simply left as it is. So what do we do is really simple. We are extracting every record, every data from the full database. And we have a lot of data in that database. And now we have here a very big result set in the ext. And we have here a start script. And the start script, for example, has here the create database statement. And we also have here the default character set. And we are simply now doing something that is a very easy way. We simply say that we do here the database. We create a new database. That is one of the ways to do so. Clone database registration info, and we simply say db1._UTF-8. And I simply place that one with UTF-8 character set. I have to go here and I say okay, and I simply say now okay, recreate database. Will be recreated, everything fine, everything okay, perfectly fine. And now we have, for example, typical different ways to operate that. If it's only a one-time operation, for example, if you are working on a database, which is, for example, the only database in your own company, it's not such a big job. But if you want to convert, for example, 500 different database servers worldwide at all your customers, or 5,000, like we have done that for another customer, it might be a little bit more complicated. So what does that mean? We have now here an empty UTF-8 database, and the empty filled with the data of the existing database, but the existing database has everything here with character set none. And if I simply run the DDL statement, I often have the problem that it will use the so-called default character set, and some of the operations are not automatically possible. Let me show you what I was talking about in that case. So let's do it in that way. I will simply do a drag and drop here. And I want to have a valid connect database statement. Set dialect tree, set names UTF-8, and so on. And I simply copy that part of the script file, and I go to the IBExpert IDE start SQL script. And this one here, that part here, is now replaced by my connect operator. So I just want to see set names UTF-8, but that will not work, because in that moment when I do that, it could be that you have some binary data inside your database that will not be binary compatible to UTF-8. We can do a very simple trick. We are using an ISO 8859_1 for most of the West European languages. It's a very good character set. And we connect to a UTF-8 database using a ISO character set, which is technically no problem. And anywhere where we have here, for example, a specific character set name, like here, character set none, we simply do a replace in that text file, character set none, and we say character set UTF-8. Because also using a ISO character set, we can create objects with UTF-8. That's no problem technically. And we also want to have the collate. Collate is the sorting order or the collation order. And anywhere where we have a collate none, we want to have, for example, a collate Unicode_CI. That's a case-insensitive possibility to make a reordering of everything. And what is also really important in our script is that we need to have, for example, some variables. I know that we have some variables like the 32,000, but that can be in the second script file in the IBE$finish, which is also created by IBExpert later. But let's have a look here at if every character set is already UTF-8. Looks very good. I save that file as IBE$start SQL, and I reload the file as IBE$finish. And we will have a look here at the 32,000. At the 32,000 variables, for example, are too long. They are not possible inside UTF-8. We have to do a shorter version of all these variables or parameters in UTF-8, for example, 4,000, because UTF-8 allows you to have up to 4 bytes per character, and that will not work otherwise. It could be that we have later some other error messages, but that would be no big problem. We simply leave it as it is. I think we store the IBE$finish script now. And the interesting thing is now we have a IBE$start script, which will create a UTF-8 table structure inside the database. But we have already an empty UTF-8 database here. So what we have to do is in the IBE$finish header, $start header, we have to change only this part of the connection string. So we are connecting to an existing UTF-8 database. We create every object with UTF-8, but we do the importing of the data using the ISO character set. And what happens at the end is really simple. We can now have a look at the runme script, runme all.sql, put everything into this log file, do not show only errors, and do not stop when an error will happen. Runme all SQL is automatically created. And this part here was already changed by us. This part here was already changed by us using the different operating. But this one is, for example, now everything that is from a customer database to be imported into that database automatically. And this one can be, for example, for sure, the data of the individual customer. When we now run the runme.bat, I think it will show still some errors because some of the parts are not so easy transferable. But you will see in the end a very easy way to convert the data from a non-character set using the ISO character set, because the ISO character set allows you to have almost any character inside your insert script automatically. Yes. Implementation of subtype, not blah, blah, blah. I think I remember. Yeah. I think we have to do the recreate database once again. So now we have again an empty database. It's always a very fast way. And we can now improve our stuff here. And one of the things is also really important. When we have here now also character set informations, we also have to replace that. So let's go back to IBExpert. Let's go back to the $finish script. And anywhere where we have the character set none should be replaced by character set UTF-8. And collate none should be replaced by collate Unicode_CI. And I think some parts could also be here a little bit bigger. But if that error will happen, create, it was a view. The view is not really important for us at the moment. Character set UTF-8, Unicode CI, and so on. I think that one should be exactly what we needed. Let's store it as the $finish and run the script again. GT3 ext runme all.bat. So it will now connect to the UTF-8 database, but uses for the connection a ISO character set. So it will be possible that all the characters, which are perhaps special characters and already stored inside your database, if you're, for example, from other countries than USA and Canada, perhaps, for example, but especially South America. I know that some of you are from South America. You might have already a small problem. And what we have seen now, it was executed successfully. And when we now go to that database, and when we now go to, for example, the animals, and the animals will have a dog, mouse, parrot, whatever, and we use, for example, some special characters in German language, A, O, U, with very special writings with 2 dots on top of that. and we will go to the implementation of that, we will see here now that the conversion, that is the UTF-8 plain text version, and that is the Unicode version. So it was definitely successful that we have created a non-UTF-8 database on the fly using some very basic IBExpert technologies. And the only thing that we needed for that is more or less tools extract metadata. So for example, if we go from that here to extract metadata, and tools extract metadata, we give it a specific directory like this one, GT3 ext. We say extract all. We say extract all tables. And if you do not want to have some of the records converted, it's also possible here to write for any table a specific where clause. So to when you want to have, for example, temporary data or data that you do not really want to convert into the new database, you can do it directly, and that way you can put a where clause here inside. And if you have selected everything with all the options that we already did here, which is really easy to click together, you see here again the extract metadata block. And the extract metadata block is exactly what we have seen already several times now, the possibility to automate the part that this one here is now the connection string to the database that we want to extract. That is at the moment not really the database that we want to extract, because I'm already on the UTF-8 database. So we should work on that one here to be exported. And that one here to be exported would be then the non-UTF-8 database. And it will have the character set none, for example, because it's a character set none. And I know from a lot of customers that they are working with character set none database only because they did not know that a character set none database might be a stupid idea for the future. One of the reasons why a character set none database is very strange, for example, if you have a customer list or something like that and you order by a customer list, character set none always means you are working, for example, with first capital characters, then the small characters, and then the special characters. That is the order by with character set none. With UTF-8, you have a proper order by. So like in the phone book, small characters are exactly where the big capitals are, and special characters are sorted into the main amount. For example, the U with 2 dots on top is the U, exactly where the U position, UE, is the position in the German phone book. And with the proper character set, you will have it also there. And it's also important to have a proper character set. For example, when you want to order that data on the fly, you can also do a character set on the fly, but indices are, for example, also using the information from character set. And that's also really helpful if you have already a working database. So changing your existing database to a UTF-8 database, if you have to handle other countries like Asia or Arabian states or so, could be a very good idea if you have already implemented that on a UTF-8 database. And from the perspective of your application, for example, if you're working with Delphi or so, it is exactly the same way as we have seen here. We can, for example, also do a database registration info, clone registration info. And we also can connect to that UTF-8 database using a character set ISO. So what does that mean? If I open that, I will have to do a remark here in my list as ISO, for example. And I open that and I go to the animals table and I go to the data and I have a look at these special characters, I see these special characters are now decoded by Firebird already before it comes to the network protocol for me, that I can directly work with a different character set on a UTF-8 database. So if you are, for example, working with a Delphi application, it's technically no big problem that your Delphi application can still connect to that database using the ISO character set, for example, even that your database is already a UTF-8 database. But parts that are, for example, your web application or web frameworks, which are often only implemented based on the UTF-8 character set, can store the data in a proper way inside your database, and you can still read that. If somebody, for example, you are a Brazilian company and you are doing an accounting system or so, and somebody is writing Chinese characters inside your system, you might still have problems to read that. But the problems to read that is not really a problem of your technical stuff. It's more or less only a problem at that moment of your, of your own knowledge. If you, for example, have some new customer who has some employees somewhere in Asia also, they can also use your the same application with the ISO character set, with the UTF-8 character set, and they can also write down their remarks inside Chinese language or Arabian language or whatever, and everything is then handled by the database itself. So that's also really helpful to have a character set solution more or less for all times, because character set is outside USA and Canada really a mess. UK perhaps also not such a big problem, but any other country will always have some problems because they have some special characters like the European currency value, for example. At the moment, I'm here in an environment where I cannot even enter that. On my German keyboard, I have the Alt-GR key, which is not on other keyboards. You can see that here. Here is somewhere my Alt-GR key, and I have to press that, and I have to press also the E, and there should be then the euro sign. But in a lot of environments, depending on what you're working on, when we, for example, go here and we start Notepad or something like that, and I press Alt-GR and E, I have the euro sign, and I can copy that, and I can try to enter that on that way, and we have it. So that's one of the classical problems, that sometimes special characters in special languages or special areas are not so easy to be converted. And the interesting thing is the euro sign, for example, for the European currency, is part of the ISO character set. There is no physical representation in character set none, because character set none has no physical table which one is a valid bytecode or not. If you have placed, for example, such a character inside a database, and this database will now be converted to a defined database, it could be a conversion error. Mail form string is a typical problem in that moment. You get a mail form string error message, and in that moment you are in trouble, more or less. The interesting thing now is I was working on that database in ISO character set. The Firebird server received the euro sign using the ISO character set. Internally, it converted it to the UTF-8 character set. And when I now go to the data set here, it is, for whatever reason, not even visible. That's interesting. Now it's visible. I placed it here again. It should have been visible also, but the euro sign and the character set none from before, and ISO character set and clipboard and Windows sometimes really will hate that possible combinations of errors. And you will definitely have no longer these kind of errors when you have already transmitted your application to UTF-8 character set. And we do all new projects always only in UTF-8 character set because we found out, especially in European markets, for example, if you think about 30 years ago, there was the Eastern Europe big border between the parts of Europe, but nowadays Europe is combined by so many languages, so many character sets, so many different versions of characters. And if you, for example, want to have a application that is globally available, UTF-8 is a solution of your choice. Every other character set is not really helpful for that. So the possible character sets which are available inside your database are always visible inside IBEBlock character sets. And in IBEBlock character sets, you see any character set that is available. And as I already said, my recommendation is UTF-8. Okay, but what I wanted to show you is, for example, also that you can, for example, use the tools extract metadata IBEBlock to extract all the data. You can also do a extract only the data. It's also possible. Tools extract metadata, even that the name does not represent that. You can directly go to the data table and simply say only, I want to have only the data tables. In that moment, we will have some other options. You can deactivate most of the options here. But what happens in that moment is really simple. You can now directly use the IBEscript. And in the IBEscript, we have now here only the table that we need. And this is only a list of table names that we want to have exported. I think everybody's now awake again. For example, if you have some kind of tables like the TMP tables, in that database they are really important, but in some databases TMP tables are not really helpful to be converted because they are deleted automatically. It might help you directly to find out a way to export your data. And what's interesting also, as you have seen here, perhaps in options, we are also able to export the blobs. And especially for blobs subtype text, you also have to do the conversion from an existing character set to UTF-8 or vice versa, depending on the direction where you want to export that. Yeah, I think a lot of informations, a lot of possibilities that you can do with the IBE scripting language. And I think one of the things also that we have in our list, activate dependencies, deactivate dependencies. You've seen that already. So for example, you can, for example, use the activate triggers, deactivate triggers here internally. You can, yeah, for example, also override triggers because you can, for example, do a metadata script. Also one of the possibilities. Let's go to the script executive, and I just want to have, for example, only a script that has all triggers. It's extremely easy to create that. And I should have before already deactivate the data tables, because otherwise it will also export the data tables. So you have now, for example, a connection statement, and you have here, for example, a lot of trigger statements, and this is only a script of all the triggers. And when you want to have, for example, a script of inactive triggers, that's also no problem at all, because the create trigger is one of the options. Let's go back here to options. use create or alter, because when you want to change them or want to newly create them, you can use the create or alter more easy. In that case, you do not have to know if they are already existing. And if you want to have, for example, a list of a script that deactivates all trigger automatically, if you have more complex environment, it's also possible. Let's go to triggers, deactivate all triggers, and make trigger inactive is one of the ways. Comment body is the other way. Comment body has one big advantage. In that moment when you have the comment body activated, in that moment every reference in the database from the trigger to, for example, table columns or anything else are automatically deactivated, and you get a really stupid dummy trigger. And what you can do now is really simple. Tools, extract metadata. We still have every trigger in our list. And we now have a very nice script that will allow us to have every trigger to be deactivated. I think should be every deactivate triggers, deactivate all triggers. I should have used all triggers, trigger body, and go. So now we have all triggers deactivated. Let's go back and execute that again. So now we have a script with a lot of comments in the source code. So the triggers are more or less available in the database, but they are not firing because none of the triggers has any valid function, and you will also have no relations like the object in use or reference in trigger or something like that. And you can, for example, use also this script to deactivate all triggers, and at the end you can simply use this functionality to activate all triggers again. In that moment, you will have the same functionality as you have seen already. I think that could be also an option to make some of the jobs a little bit more easier. Yeah, I think for today, that's it. It's time for some advertising. I do not get paid for that, but I was talking approximately 2 hours and without interruption. Yeah, if you have any more questions, just place them in the chat box, send them by email, or yeah, simply send by email at support@IBExpert.com. If you want to subscribe for a new version of IBExpert, simply write your question to sales@IBExpert.com, and stay healthy. And I think for today, thank you very much. And you will get the informations. Rio. Yeah, you are really a little bit in trouble, I think, at the moment with some of the, I do not have to talk about politics. Thank you very much for attending, and we will try to make as much sessions as possible. It could be that one of the sessions in the future might already be canceled for a different customer job again, but you will get always the announcement on our website and also by email. If you have entered your email and go to meeting, you will get an email invitation, and you will also get every recorded session on YouTube. Bye-bye. See you, stay healthy, and goodbye.